Podcasters, podcast guests, anyone considering being any one of those things, this is particularly for you. And what I'm going to talk about today applies to any solely auditory environment, i.e. radio podcasting, where there is no visual component. And you'll see why that matters. I'm S.J. Harrison, voice and performance coach. I've been a producer, actor, and playwright for over 20 years, and this information came to me when my first play was produced, because it was a radio play and it was produced on BBC Radio 4. And I learned in the process a lot about voices. The producer was quite attentive to this one factor when she was casting the three men involved. So when you have voices of the same gender and generally particularly the same accent, you need to also think about casting different voices so that people will know at all times who's speaking. Good actors can change their voices also to assist with that process, but it's really important that we always know who's speaking. So now you're going to see the connection with podcasts. I was listening to two podcast hosts who had on their podcast two other podcast hosts as guests. They were all women of about the same age, had very similar accents, and all spoke within a very similar vocal tone. I could not tell much of the time who was speaking, and they got very excited and they tend to talk over each other or sort of keep interjecting. I understand that it's very natural and spontaneous, but we need to be more attentive to clarity when we have no visuals. When you're a podcast host with one guest, there's a slower pace, there's kind of a question is asked, a question is responded to. Usually, even if you have a similar voice, we're more likely to be able to know who's speaking just based on the content. Well, in this case of these four women, much of the time I could not tell who was speaking and I had to turn off. What could they have done differently? Well, they certainly could have had a conversation ahead of time and instituted a protocol and even practiced it a bit before the recording, such as using the name of the person you're asking a question of. It also means structuring it a little bit less spontaneously so that you have a host or hosts who are in tandem, or one of them could take the lead, really running the conversation enough so that we're using names when we're asking people a question. So it could be something like, Leslie, can you tell us more about? And say Leslie responds and then somebody else interjects. You might have to step in and say, Alison, I really appreciate your saying that. So even if it's after the fact, you have named the person. As podcast hosts, you are going to be able to come up with a lot of good ideas for how to clarify this. But just know this is something you need to clarify. It really makes for a better listening experience for us. Hope this was helpful. Please like, comment, and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook or IG, comment, like. It really helps my videos to be seen by more people. Here's to unlocking your performance power.